Hello, it is me again, the Seraphim Princess. I just wanted to follow up a poll that I made on Twitter. It is about what character would people like to see added to Super Mario RPG if an HD edition was made with 2 extra stages. For those of you unfamiliar with Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars, Squaresoft had partnered with Nintendo to produce this game, and it was the predecessor to Paper Mario and Mario and Luigi series. This, on the other hand, was superior in all ways by graphics and story to the Paper Mario and Mario and Luigi games, as it was a joint project between Squaresoft and Nintendo both. But things weren't meant to be, as Nintendo had partnership with Sony also for development of a CD add-on, much like the Sega CD was to the Sega Genesis, known as the Nintendo PlayStation. But Nintendo went to Philips, who have just produced the Philips CDI, and gave them permission to produce 2 Mario games and 3 Zelda games, of which would all be ill-fated, except for the last Mario game that had potential to become a direct sequel to Super Mario World, and could have been an excellent game if it wasn't cancelled mid-development. It was known as Mario's Wacky Worlds, but after Sony found out about Nintendo and Philips' partnership, they decided to go out on their own to produce the Sony PlayStation, which today Sony is one of the 2 juggernauts taking on Nintendo with their PlayStation system and Microsoft with the Xbox. But Squaresoft attempted to make Final Fantasy VII for the Nintendo 64 and found out that due to limited cartridge space, they could not develop a quality sequel to Final Fantasy VI, known as Final Fantasy III on the Super Nintendo in the US, would go on to develop Final Fantasy VII on the Sony PlayStation. And due to this, Squaresoft's partnership with Nintendo would come to a bitter end for the duration of the Nintendo 64 and the Game Boy Color generations of gaming consoles, and they would not return to a Nintendo system till the Nintendo GameCube and Game Boy Advance consoles. So Nintendo made their own sequel to Super Mario RPG called Paper Mario, which was okay as a sequel to Super Mario RPG, but would not be as good as Super Mario RPG due to the fact that Squaresoft still owned many of the characters featured in the game that would not go on to be in Paper Mario. The graphics seemed more like a paper doll pop-up book, and the gameplay and story would be revamped as well. But now there's hope that since Squaresoft has come back to making games for Nintendo systems, an HD edition could be made with a new character and 2 new stages, as well as a sequel with new and old characters alike, including favorites like Geno and Marlo. But here are my character ideas for a guest Final Fantasy character and new levels for Super Mario RPG HD Edition if Nintendo and Squaresoft ever make it. This cameo hog needs no introduction, as he's appeared in many video games since Final Fantasy VII, but Cloud Strife is the first runner-up of the poll I made, who is tied with the second runner-up, and shockingly, as the least wanted character to be added. Cloud's introductory level would be the Shinra building. Now, once you reach the highest point that you can reach in the building, you would run into a point where Princess Peach would separate from the group. She would walk up to a certain location where Sephiroth would come down and attempt an Aerith on her, and Cloud would jump in to save the day at the last minute. At this point, Sephiroth would retreat and leave behind Jenova, and an epic boss battle would ensue between Jenova and Mario and his party. And after defeating Jenova, you would continue the game as normal up until you reach the area right before you get to Smithy, where the next stage would be unlocked. The second area would be the Northern Crater, where you would have to navigate yourself to the bottom of the Northern Crater, where you will eventually fight two more bosses. The bosses would be Sephiroth and Safer Sephiroth, which would be the ultimate epic boss battle. Next runner-up is Squall Leonhardt, aka Leon, from Final Fantasy VIII in the Kingdom Hearts series. He is the second most cameo hog next to Cloud Strife, being he's appeared in Final Fantasy VIII, Kingdom Hearts, Chocobo Racing, and the Dissidia games. His introductory level would be the Lunatic Pandora, where he would be found by Mario and his party, taking on his longtime rival, known as Seifer. Seifer and Squall would be duking it out when Mario comes to help Squall. Just like with Cloud's final stage, if Squall was chosen, then you would unlock Ultimecia's castle instead of the Northern Crater right before fighting Smithy, and fight against Ultimecia herself right before facing off in an epic battle against her final form that you would fight after defeating her first. As with the runners-up, the winners were tied as well, as Mog was voted as one of the winners. Mog, who is a Moogle, would of course have his iconic dance moves brought to the Super Mario universe in Super Mario RPG HD if chosen to be a extra character. His introductory level would be the Mountains of Narsh, where you would take on none other than Lone Wolf Pickpocket to save Mog to get him to join your party. For the second stage, it would be, of course, Kefka's Tower, where you would take on Kefka in both his wizard magician form and then, of course, in his mad god form. It would be the ultimate in all battles. The second winner tied, which is number one in my opinion, would have to be Vivi Ornitier from Final Fantasy IX. also based upon the Black Mage in general from numerous Final Fantasy games. Vivi's introductory level would be the Ice Caverns, where once you got to the end, you would have to take on the Black Waltz 1 to be able to get Vivi to join your party after saving him. Next up would be a second Smithy's factory based on Dolly Underground with Black Waltz number 2, as well as ultimately Black Waltz number 3 as the two bosses you would face. Next up, an honorable mention, Go-Go from Final Fantasy V and VI. Now, to get him to join your party, you would have to get swallowed by a sandworm, make it through his caverns, and then you would get him to join after fighting him and successfully mimicking him. His second level would, of course, be Kefka's Tower, like Mog. Depending on if Nintendo and Square Enix do make an HD edition of Super Mario RPG and add a bonus character, whatever second area is added to correspond with the character added will have ultimate gear for that character as well as the existing Mario RPG characters. Well, that's a wrap up of this episode of Seraphim Princess Gaming Thoughts. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for watching, everyone. Goodbye. La 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 la.